Hello, my name is Ronan Hart. I'm with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Today is July 15th, 2021. We're at the Delta Cultural Center in West Helena, Arkansas. I am interviewing Kyle Miller, at the Delta Cultural Center. All right. Could you introduce yourself? Give us your full name, spell your full name for the record.
Sure. My name is Kyle T. Miller, PhD, Kyle T. Miller. Mm-hmm. And I am the Executive Director of the Delta Cultural Center, and also a direct descendant from the Elaine Massacre.
Okay. Were you born in Elaine?
I was not. I was actually born in Pine Bluff, but grew up here in Helena.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about your childhood in Pine Bluff, or if you moved anywhere else?
I actually lived here. Lived here my life. Born in Pine Bluff, but actually grew up here my life, or at least until I was 18. Then I went to college and moved off.
Mm-hmm. What would you say your childhood was like? Your family living around here?
It was happy. It was fairly happy. Race, I mean, I don't know really the direction of the conversation is going, but I mean, race has obviously always been an issue here. I assume like a lot of southern towns, but race was always very prominent and to the front. But otherwise, a very happy. Mm-hmm. Happy childhood.
Okay. You can take a conversation where you want. We're just following you wherever you go.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about your parents, what they did in town, what their jobs were?
Yeah. So my dad, he was a physician, second generation doctor, family practitioner. He left here when he was 16 and went to Xavier in New Orleans. He was a track star. Then but he didn't initially go to Xavier to be a physician. He actually majored in business. And when he finished his degree program, he came back in this area and he became a principal of Rondo, which is out towards Elaine. They no longer have a school. He basically qualified to be the principal because he had a degree. And so he was a principal of Rondo for a year, and then he just kind of spent a year just kind of, I guess you could say, trying to find himself or whatever. And after that year, he decided that he was going to be a physician, and so he went to Tennessee State, which at that time was called A&I, Agriculture and Industrial School, and took the science courses he needed to apply for medical school. And then he applied to medical school and went to Meharry, and that's where he met my mom. Mm-hmm. And so he came and practiced. He finished from Meharry and then did his residency in Philadelphia. And my grandfather, he was getting older in age, and he asked Dad if Dad would come down and practice with him. And so Dad came back here, and so they built a new physicians building, and they began to practice together.
So your granddad was also a physician?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He was a physician too. He went to Howard.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So my granddad went to Howard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're also a doctor.
Yeah. I make the joke. I say I'm a doctor, but I'm one of those doctors that can't help anybody. So
I think you're probably helping a lot of people. Right? I wouldn't say that. So it sounds like you probably didn't have much of a choice about going to college. It sounds like higher education, your family really valued that. Right?
Yeah. But it's kind of interesting because it was never really forced on me, but it was just kind of expected. I mean, you just already knew you were going to college. It's just kind of more like where, mm-hmm. But it was never like, boy, you going to college, mm-hmm. Like it was with some other things. but yeah. So I pretty much knew it was just one of those things that was expected. Yeah.
So you grew up in Elaine, went somewhere else for college, and
Well, grew up here in Helena.
Oh, in Helena.
Grew up in Helena, and then went to University of Central Arkansas for college. My first stint in college.
So how did you get involved in, Delta cultural or community like activities like the center right now?
Ooh, that's a long story, but
Tell as much as you want.
That's why we're here.
okay. So, all right. Okay, so I finished Central Arkansas, and then when I finished Central Arkansas, that was in '92. That was during that recession. Big Bush was in office. That's funny. Recession with Daddy Bush and recession with Little Bush, but interesting. But there was a recession then, so it really weren't a whole lot of people hiring, especially in journalism and communications.
Was that your major?
That was, and so I came home. And I said, well, I'll just work, and so that's what I did. I worked, and anything to do with my degree program. I went and worked at Kroger, and basically paid my credit card bills off while I stayed at home. and people were like, "Oh, you have a degree? You're working at Kroger?" And it was all good. I got my credit cards paid off. So then I went back to school and got my master's in radio television from Arkansas State, and that was a good thing because Arkansas State had more of a technical program, so that's where I really learned how to edit and shoot and do production and all of the other stuff that I really should have learned in undergrad. And so after then, I worked in the news business, and so I started out in Huntsville. And I started out as a associate producer and reporter. And then the management, they were so impressed with my leadership skills that they then asked me to move into the management track, which sometimes I think now, I kind of wonder if I should have done that, but oh well, God kind of has a way of doing stuff. And so I got out of the talent phase and went the management track. And in that phase, things just really moved really quick because then I was there for 2 years, and then 2 years later I was in Tulsa, and then like a year later I was interviewing in Dallas. I mean, so literally like in the space of like 5 years, I was being considered for like a top 10 market, which is crazy. But in the midst of that, I had, I guess you could say, a spiritual conversion, and I decided that I didn't want to do television news. I didn't really want to do television news anymore, and so I decided to. I basically just decided I wanted to do something else, and I went to seminary.
Oh, wow.
In Pasadena, I went to Fuller Theological. That was a wonderful experience. Of course, my family, they thought I was crazy. It was like, what? You're quitting that good job to do what? Huh? So they just thought I was absolutely crazy. So I did that, and then when I finished, I came back, went back into the news business, worked for Channel 5, the NBC affiliate here in the Memphis area, that almost killed me. And then finally one day I was, I don't know, something crazy was going on. It was something going on out in North Memphis or something, and I was in the bathroom. And, I was stressed out, and all the scanners were going off and stuff. I just heard something in my heart say, you know, Kyle, it's only news. And it just came to me. I said, yeah, it's only news, you know.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we kind of, in the news business, you kind of think things are a lot more serious than what they really are. Because in reality, most real people really only think about it for about 3 days. You know, but when you're in that bubble of the news business, you tend to think of it as it's a lot more important than what it really is. And so I said, yeah. So I decided to leave. And so my dad had been telling me about this new culture center that had been built in Helena. He said, there's this guy, John Matthews, you need to talk to him. I was like, okay. And so I called him. He said, oh, yeah, your background. He said, you know, we've actually got a position for an assistant communications person. And I said, oh, okay. And so I came, and that's what I did. And that was actually my first job. It was here when I came back to Arkansas. Mm-hmm. And I did that part-time. And then while I was there, the receptionist who was here, her husband was the director of the after-school programs for the school district. Mm-hmm. And she was like, well, you know, he's looking for some people to help him out, you know. I said, a school program? I said, no, I'm not interested. And she says, well, it pays $15 an hour. I said, okay, sign me up.
I would too.
I said, sign me up. So I went out there, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved the kids. You know, all this stuff I was hearing about those bad kids, I didn't really see it that way. I just saw it was just a lot of kids that just really needed attention. And it was really where I found my call. And so when he got ready to leave, it was an after-school program, he asked me if I'd be considering taking his job, because he said he was going to refer me. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. And then from there, I got my teacher certification. Then I went back and got my PhD in higher ed, and all that stuff happened. It's a whole lot in between, but I was working in Little Rock, and the director's position had came up here. I had saw it open for a while. I didn't bother to apply because, you know, I said, well, they probably have already decided who they want, and they're probably just posting as a formality. And so I didn't apply. And so the first month went by, second month, third month, and by the fourth month, I thought, it's okay, maybe this is a legitimate, you know, post, you know, a legitimate talent search. And so I applied. I got selected, so it was cool. Yeah, and so I was already familiar with a lot of things about the Culture Center and its philosophy, its relationship with the Department of Arkansas Heritage. And of course, a lot of other things had changed because it had been like 15 years, maybe 12 years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things had changed in just that short a period of time. Mm-hmm. A lot of things had changed. And so I had to get reacclimated to it. And then it was a lot different because, you know, I was, you know, an assistant the first time, and then now I'm the director. So that was a completely different thing. But I'm really glad that I had that experience, because I think that I was able to look at my staff and things from a better perspective. I think it's always good. I mean, I know you can't always, you know, work your way from the bottom up, but I think it's awesome when you can, or if you have those types of experiences, because I think you see things different, and hopefully you can respond to your staff a little bit more respectfully, because you've been there, or you've been on that side.
Mm-hmm. You said that you were the after-school program director at a school. Could you tell me what the name of that school is, unless you've already mentioned it?
Helena, West Helena School District. Mm-hmm. I did that from, what was it, 2002 to 2005. Yeah, because in 2005 I then went to Phillips College.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
And then when we were just talking right before we started our interview, you were saying that one of the after-school projects that you're doing just today was the Elaine Massacre and having the kids write about that. Could you talk to me a little bit about like the history of Elaine and how that ties into your after-school projects and like how the kids are responding to it?
Well, okay, so you know, obviously Elaine is a big part of Delta history, and it's a history that really hasn't really been talked a whole lot about until like the last 20 years. You know, even as far back as 2001, when the then education coordinator, Nasheed Mayun, he had gotten a grant from Arkansas Humanities Council to do oral histories like you all are doing. And so he put together a symposium on the Elaine Massacre, and then he brought in Griff Stockley, whose book, Blood in Our Eyes, I think it may have been out maybe a couple of years. It hadn't been out very long. And I think they even had like a reading club or some other things like that with book discussions. And it was like pulling teeth to try to get people involved because people still just did not really want to talk about it. There was still a lot of misnomers and misconceptions about even the events that happened surrounding it. And so then fast forward to 2018, David Solomon and his brother Raymond, their descendants were actually involved in the massacre, but on the white side, the not good side, and they'll admit that. I don't know, I don't know how you say, if you want to say they wanted to right or wrong, or if they wanted to address the issue in some type of responsive way. They said, we feel like there should be a monument. And so they began to start putting together a group of people who were interested in that issue. And so they went out and raised and solicited, private dollars to make that happen. And so then the conversations really began to start brewing and becoming relevant, I guess you could say, again, because the anniversary was coming up. And so now, this year, we were looking at various topics, because we always try to look at some period or point in Delta history. Last year, we looked at the civil rights movement, but we looked at it as it related to the Delta. And this year, the kids they said they wanted to look at the Elaine Massacre. And so we're looking at different aspects of it. And of course, it's a lot of different things to look at. And we're still trying to fine tune what all that's going to look like if we just focus on particular characters, so to speak, people who were involved, or we look at particular situations.
Oh my gosh. So I actually have two questions for you, I guess.
Okay.
I think, first of all, it's interesting that you focus on people that were involved in the massacre, because I was speaking to a teacher in Gainesville who wanted to teach about the Ocoee massacre, and she did the exact same thing. And she said that making kids empathize with people is the best way to help them understand the history. So I think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
I also wanted to ask, as a journalist, your opinion about the role of journalism in the Elaine Massacre, or in the aftermath as well.
Yeah, journalism played a significant part, both good and bad. Local journalism our local press, here in Helena, the Helena local papers, in my opinion, did a terrible job. It was very biased and slanted, with a narrative that was just not factual. However, it also did play, it also gave us some very significant information. Like my curator, he was doing some research, and he found an article where basically it was a notification where the sheriff's department was had a notification out saying that they were trying to get guns back, because the local sheriff's department had literally, I guess you could say, leased out or let people take out guns to take down to Elaine for the, isn't that terrible? to take down to the massacre.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that's a very interesting point that is documented. And so in that way, I think journalism itself it served its purpose, even if it's not in a not so good way.
Yeah.
In some good ways, Ida B. Wells, her documentation of the massacre, to me, is fantastic. I mean, I don't know if Dr. Olson shared with you, but the Johnston brothers are my great uncles. Mm-hmm. I got tons of anecdotal and background information just from reading that art that I found personally beneficial. From her, I guess you could say her investigative, because that's what it was. It was an investigative piece that she did, and she came in to do an investigative piece, basically, narrating what actually took place, because she had gotten word and had the understanding that what was being reported wasn't factual or wasn't accurate. And so thank goodness we have, her report.
Yes.
We have her report documented, which now, compared to, several of the other historical accounts, is bearing out to be pretty accurate, if not completely accurate. So I think in some ways very good, in some ways not so much. Mm-hmm.
And how can how we write about Elaine improve today?
I think telling the story, and I think not trying to. I think not trying to so quickly place an angle on it. Mm. And okay, I spent almost 10 years in the news business.
Yeah. And
one of the things that we would do in the bigger markets I went to, when I was in smaller markets, you kind of more organically found your story. This was going on, and so you would go out there and you would cover it, and it's kind of like what you found is what you found. But I noticed that the higher the market I went, the more constricted and restricted it was, even in how the reporters were to cover it. So and oftentimes that happened in the morning story room or in the afternoon story meeting, not when they got out to the story. So let's say, for instance, there's a fire. There was a fire from the night before, and there's all these different things going on. It could be arson, it could be this, it could be that. The producers, the EP and the news director or whoever, they'll sit there and decide sometimes in the morning story meeting what the angle is going to be. And that's why you see such a stark contrast in how a story is covered when you watch MSNBC from CNN to Fox, because everybody's got their own angle of how they've already decided that story is going to be covered before they even walk out the door. Now, sometimes that can be okay, because it will help the reporter focus in on what they're going to get, so they don't have to spend a whole bunch of time grabbing a whole bunch of information from a lot of different areas. But what happens if you get out there to the story and it's not what you've already angled? And what the problem what would happen a lot of times in the major markets would be, by the afternoon we had already promoted the angle. So you were locked into an angle or something, and that wasn't even what the story was about. So, yeah. So you all as growing journalists, y'all are blessed with the uprising of the web channels and the cable, and the internet channels and stuff, because you really have an awesome position to really be able to push back on some of that crap and really tell some of these stories the way they're really supposed to be told. Anyway, that's my little stump speech.
So I want to go back a little bit and talk about your ancestors.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned that your grandfather was also a doctor, and my background, I really focus on rural political activism around this period. So I'm really interested in Black folks who had non-traditional roles, especially in the South during this period. So can you talk a little bit about your grandfather?
Yeah, and see, let me share something. What's interesting is Elaine is a direct result of that, because when Elaine went down, my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather, they was like, get him the hell out of here. And so they sent my grandfather to boarding school.
Where?
Boston. They sent him to Boston. They sent him to Boston. And that had a direct effect on the family too, because Granddad went to Boston, and Granddad was always kind of detached. Mm-hmm. He came back, he met my grandmother in Mariana, which is a little other small town. He married her on a bet. She was a very beautiful woman. He met her. He told some of his friends, "I'm gonna marry her," and they're like, "Yeah, man, whatever." He goes and he marries my grandmother, and then he leaves. Mm-hmm. And so my great grandmother Eliza, she hears about it. And she calls him, he's in Texas. And she says, "Robert, did you marry this girl?" And he said, "Yeah, Mom, I did." She said, "You need to go get that girl." And so they went and got my grandma, and she stayed in the house with them. And she basically was pretty much like their servant, really. But she stayed in the house with them. And while he was in Texas, but see, Elaine kind of had a really direct effect on that, because it was kind of almost like he never kind of quite connected. Later, he did move back. He moved back to Helena and assumed a practice here, and then my dad came and things of that nature. But for many years, he was off. He was off somewhere, and that, Phillips County, pre-Elaine, there was a lot of what we call the non-traditional Blacks here. Mm-hmm. So a lot of affluent Blacks, because I don't know how much history I've had to do concerning Phillips County, but so the Civil War starts in 61. Mm-hmm. As early as the beginning of 62, the Union soldiers come through St. Francis County, which is up a few counties up north of us. And they say, they tell the slaves, they say, hey, y'all follow us in through on into Phillips County, we'll classify you as contraband, and you'll be free. Mm-hmm. So as early as 1862, people who came into Phillips County were free. Mm-hmm. So Phillips County was like a mecca, and it remained that way really until Elaine. So you had the combination of Elaine along with all these silly Jim Crow laws, and it just really started repealing back all of the progress that was being made from Reconstruction. And it was just, and then so with that, then you saw the great, Northern migration. And it's interesting, a scholar from University of Arkansas, Jenny Wayne, she came and spoke at one of our symposiums, and she said, when you compare the Northern migration in the state of Arkansas at that time, immediately following the massacre, that Phillips County's migration was 30% higher than the rest of the state.
Mm. And what year was your grandfather born?
Ooh, I'd have to look, but I can give you that. I can give you that.
Okay.
I can give you that. It would be, because I know it's on my ancestry.com, but I'll be happy to send that to you.
Okay.
I know he died in 68.
Okay.
He died in 68, though.
So was he born in the 1800s then? Late 1800s?
No, I think like 1900s. He was born in the early 1900s. Because I think he died, he was like 62.
He died young.
Mm-hmm.
So prior to this, we had actually spoken to another resident of Elaine, and she was talking a little bit about the city being unable to provide Black residents their land that's like rightfully theirs. Could you talk to us a little bit about that, what you've seen over the years? Yeah. And has it gotten worse?
Yeah. I can't address that because I can't address that because I just can't address it, and I'll tell you why. Because from and I'm not a historian, although I work around history. I can't address it because from what I can tell, and from the research I've done and from the historians I've talked to. And hear me, I haven't done exhaustive research. The majority of the citizens of Elaine were sharecroppers. I know one of the 12, in the trial, owned land. And I know the rest of them were sharecroppers. But the majority of the citizens, the people of Black citizens of Elaine were sharecroppers. So I'm not really quite sure about that. I've heard stories like that African Americans' land in Elaine was stolen. I don't know.
I could just.
But I have said this. I said if anyone can verify that to me, I would love to hear it, because to me, I think it's very fascinating and interesting. I haven't been able to verify it.
Yeah, I think you could probably talk to our director about that, if you're open to it. But we just spoke to a woman today. Her family bought land sometime,
Okay, so she purchased land? Okay.
Her family bought land, and
they purchased land in Elaine.
Yeah, and currently,
this was after the massacre?
After the massacre.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what we were trying to.
And now they're not able to get it? It's been taken?
Yeah, it's been taken by the county. Yeah.
Oh. Without paying her no rent.
Oh, no.
And she's like, can you stop paying rent? And they're like, no.
Yeah, the city is doing a lot of roundabout ways of trying to disprove her claim to the land, even though she literally has the deed.
Oh, no.
Paying taxes on it for
Oh, that's horrible. Okay, yeah.
So you mentioned that you have an ancestry. Are you really into genealogy?
Yeah. I mean, I won't say I'm a genealogist, but yeah.
Well, I think everyone we've spoken to in some way has mentioned their ancestry account or that they took an ancestry test or something like that. And I just wanted to know, how does it feel to be able to take a test and to be able to look back into your past via the internet?
It's pretty cool. It's cool because it's good to be able to be verified. I've only done Ancestry.com. I haven't done there's another one, I think it's called African Ancestry. I want to do that one too, because I think that's one that kind of tells you like what tribe, you came from or whatever. So I really would like, because I know there is there's obviously the European side, but there's also the African side, and from Western Africa. I'm curious to know what tribe I'm from. Also, I think they said Oprah found out she was from some tribe. I want to find out what tribe I'm from.
Yeah, people have had a lot of luck with it too.
Yeah, I want to know. I want to know.
Well, I hope you find out.
Oh, I do too.
Do you have a question? I'm so sorry about this, by the way. This region's past.
Not the best system. So through doing all the ancestry research, are there any like really unique stories or things with your ancestors that like come to mind?
Let me see. Unique things. Wow. Huh.
They're just interesting, really.
Well, I didn't expect my European lineage to be as strong as it was. I had always heard, and I think a lot of Black folks like y'all get this. I'd always heard, you got some Indian in you, or we got some Indian, or whatever. I think all Black folks say that or are told that. And so we did, I did the ancestry. It was none. I mean, I think it was maybe like, I had 1%, like Indian. It was like, and it was really, really, really more connected to Asia. But I had a very high European. It was like 49% European. So literally when I was looking at the thing, I was like, okay, so I'm basically I'm half white, half Black. So that was kind of shocking. But let me see what else. Some cool stuff. And then another thing too. This is kind of more of a byproduct though. I found out that my mom's family, who goes back from Georgia, it was harder getting their records than it was the records here. But the records here in Helena are like pristine and perfect. And I would have never expected that. But Phillips County kept very, very, very good records.
Do you think that's because of Sherman, like the March to the Sea?
I don't know, but whatever it was, they were obviously very concerned about record keeping, and they did a very good job. Very good job. Because I mean, you can go all the way back to, immediately after the Civil War and pretty much find almost anything.
I'm curious.
And I also found out one other funny thing. I found out, it's kind of funny. I found out through the ancestry, I found this old article, and my great grandfather, he had married this woman from Oberlin College, Caucasian lady from Oberlin College.
Your great-great-grandfather?
My great-great-grandfather, which that really shocked me. From Oberlin College. After the Civil War, when they established the Quaker school out in Southland, and he married this lady. Her name was Henrietta. And
They
so
lived in Arkansas? Wow.
Wait, they... Oh, wow.
that shocked me. And it was funny because the local paper had printed and they said that they went to Memphis and got married for $1. And then the article said, in Memphis you can do anything for $1. That was funny. So.
So I know you had just mentioned that your mom's side was from Georgia, and so I was curious if, with that ancestry, were her ancestors part of the group of people who migrated to Arkansas during this time period of?
No, actually not. Mm-mm.
Really?
No. Mm-mm. No. Mom met Dad actually in college. That was kind of how that was kind of that connection there.
Okay.
Yeah. Connected there.
So Dr. Olson was saying that you were a descendant of a pastor. Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah, that would be Abraham.
Yeah, and of the Centennial Pastor Church, if I'm saying that correctly, and it was destroyed. Could you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah. Okay. So, pastor, yes. Yeah. Okay. Let me explain it. So, Abraham, my great grandfather, he never really wanted to preach, but he was a respected man in town. And he was a man of resources, and so he would like basically finance and help the churches get built, and then he would stand in as a leader, and then he would turn those churches over. But he is listed as a leader of several, as a pastor of several of those churches, including Centennial.
And Centennial, Dr. Olson was saying that it was destroyed. Like, what happened there?
Well, okay, so kind of a long story, but the short is, due to needed repair in the late 80s, they closed it because they felt as though it was unsafe. It went through several long years of neglect. Fast forward about 3 years ago, a new board came into being to try to get it back restored the best we could. And in the meantime, it was just basically a little bit too late. And so in April of was that 1990? No, of 2020. Yeah, in April of 2020, high winds came in and basically blew all of the face off of it. So now the current board is working to get it recognized as a national park, and it's going pretty good. It's going pretty good, but it's politicians. So.
Well, in that case, I guess the follow-up would be, I just wanted to know, what role religion and, the church played in your life, and then, in the broader context of life in Elaine.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's a good question. I mean, I'll answer the question in reverse. As far from Elaine's perspective, I think it played everything, because even the initial the initial meeting that was held by the union, it was held in the church. It was held in the Hujsa church. Later, when things were not going good, the white community came to E.C. Morris, who was one of the religious leaders at the time, and they asked him if he would come and talk to black citizens. I guess it pretty much try to calm them down or get them together. Many people feel as though E.C. Morris's responses weren't good. I could see why, because he did initially go along with that request, and basically told African Americans, at least he was quoted publicly as saying that they didn't really need to be out, supporting any type of protest. Mm-hmm. That clearly was not the right response. Later, though, his views began to change. That was an area that really disturbed me when we went through and read the research. Later, because we actually have an exhibit that's opening next month dealing with E.C. Morris and Centennial. And so we did a lot of extensive research. We basically read through all of his sermons and all of his documents and everything. And one of the things that's really interesting is he basically says, and hear me, I'm paraphrasing. I can give you the exact quote, but he basically says, in so many uncertain terms, about a year or so later, he says, I basically have come to the conclusion that, no matter, how much we follow the rules, no matter how well we conform to what they want us to, we'll never be good enough for them. And when he was talking about good enough for them, he was referring to the white establishment. Right. He said we'll never be able to meet their expectations because at the end of the day, racism is just illogical. Mm-hmm. Yep. You can't, whereas initially he thought that, well, if we, because he took on a Booker T. Washington approach that if you follow the rules and you did the social expectations that eventually, you will win favor. And he just quickly, began to see it won't matter because the racism is just illogical. Mm-hmm. So he did have a mindset change, but he was obviously a spiritual, a leader in that. As far as with me, spirituality has been everything. I was raised Catholic. And I was expected to go to church, and if I didn't,
you were raised Catholic?
I was raised Catholic. Mm-hmm.
That's not very common.
No,
down here.
No. But believe it or not, there was quite a big Catholic population. Now, Dad. Now, it's a funny story about the Catholic thing. Dad actually grew up Methodist. Okay. And, but he went to Xavier, which is a Catholic college. So when he went to Xavier, this is funny. So the nuns told him, they said, well, but long story short, they basically told him, they said, we'll give you more scholarship money if you convert to Catholicism.
Stop.
Yeah.
They bribed him.
They bribed him.
They kept going. It worked.
So it worked. It worked because he stayed a Catholic. Yeah, he stayed a Catholic. Mm-hmm. He grew to love the faith, and he stayed.
Did you notice any differences in activism among Catholic priests and pastors?
Here? Mm-hmm. No, none of the priests here were were activists at all. Okay. Matter of fact, there were very few activists. Anytime you really thought about political activists, in our minds, we immediately thought Baptist. Okay. Not even Pentecostal. For some reason, it was when you thought activists, you thought Black Baptists. Okay. Those were usually the only religious leaders who were involved in activism. Everybody else was kind of pretty much trying to stay out of that. That's a good question.
I guess I had, I wanted to go back to like your conversation about journalism, just because like I'm a journalist and I like really enjoy these conversations about like objectivity and stuff.
Yeah.
Just because newsrooms in general don't really tell the stories of communities of color, especially Black communities in the South, with much grace. And when we were at the Elaine Center yesterday, one of the speakers was talking about journalists coming into Elaine and not knowing how to properly ask questions to the residents. They were saying that people were coming and just essentially saying, "Did you know about the Elaine massacre?" as if these people are not aware of their own history. I just wanted to know, like, what were your thoughts on that, and like, how can journalists who want to tell the story of Elaine ask these questions, and like, how much time should they dedicate to a story that can comprehensively talk about Elaine?
Yeah, let me first say something with that. Me being a journalist, and especially if they were TV journalists, they were asking from that perspective because they were immediately trying to prompt them to say, well, I know about I remember from blah, blah. They were immediately trying to get them to say in their immediate soundbite the phrase, even if they knew that they knew about it. So some of that was kind of coaching with that, but they should have explained that to them. That was just bad reporting. They should just told them. They should have said, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna ask this question, but I need you to start the question off by saying blah blah blah." You know, for television. So that was not good. But even still, in the what was the second part of that in the objectivity?
Just like the fact that people kind of come in here with their own assumptions, and like how to better do that.
I don't know if I could. I don't know if I felt as much on assumptions as in on story agendas.
Yeah.
One of the agendas was there's these two groups fighting against each other, and so then it was our group, the Elaine Massacre Foundation, against Dr. Olson's group, you know, her group. And it's like, yeah, they were basically trying to say that we were against each other, that we were fighting against each other. And there were some intense conversations, and I'll be honest with you about that. There were some intense conversations because Dr. Olson strongly felt, and I respect her view, she felt that the monument should be built in Elaine. And I think that's a valid point. It was just that this was a monument that was built with private dollars, and the people who raised the money said, "Hey, we want to put it here." You know, it's a little different if you're receiving grant money or if you're receiving public funds, as opposed to private philanthropists who say, "I want to put it here." You know, so that was really the issue. And they had various reasons, which I'm not going to go into all that. But and so when that whole deal came out, then that was kind of what the whole thing became about. I was like, we don't have anything against them, and we don't have anything against a monument being built in Elaine. We think that's great, you know. So it's kind of we kind of had to go through that, you know, for the first few months, you know, and then there was a one issue. I know when they started, I think they did a groundbreaking down in Elaine, and they built a tree, and then the tree got trampled on or something. Then they came and asked us for comments. And I specifically told them from the beginning, I was like, I don't have anything really to comment about that, except I think that's really sad. I think that's terrible, whoever did it. If they find them, they need to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. But that's the only thing I can really comment on that. I said, now, if you can assure me that I'm not going to be interviewed about that, then yeah, I'll talk to you. And they said, yeah, we're not going to interview about that. Okay. So they come and interview. So what do you think about the tree that got...
That's so annoying.
Yeah.
I said, I told you, so...
Yeah.
But, and I get it, it's a 5 o'clock story, it's 2 o'clock, you got to turn something, and you got the live truck out there, you got to have a story by 5. I get it, but anyway. Mm-hmm. So those are the commercial aspects of journalism that you deal with, and those things I kind of just had to look at and say, okay, well, I understand she had a story she had to get, but I'm not gonna take it personal, but I felt like besides those things, everything else has been okay. It's been pretty decent. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have asked a lot of open-ended questions. A lot of the people within the group that pretty much turned a lot of stuff over to me because they're like, I'm tired of talking. I don't want to talk about this. I'm like, it's okay. I'll do it.
Thanks for talking to us.
Yeah, I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. It's like, I'm tired of talking. I'm like, it's okay.
I'm kind of curious about the center.
Yeah.
You said it was like John Matthews who was in charge of it when you came working with us.
Yeah, that was in 98 to 2002.
Did he found the center? Was it your...
No. It actually goes back a little bit further than that. The center opened in October of '89, and there were a few directors before him. The center itself was just kind of trying to find its way. Always had good support from Arkansas Department of Heritage. Leadership in the beginning was a little shaky. Not the leaders that they chose, but just the leaders themselves. I don't know. They just like they kind of went through a few leaders in the initial days, So.
Have you seen it grow a lot from how it was when you came at first? To how does it...
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because even the properties. So when I was here in 2001, we had this property, the depot, and what else? I think that was it. We were discussing purchasing. No, we had just purchased Moore Horner, which is our historic home, and now we have 9 properties. Wow. So yeah, it's grown tremendously since then. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm definitely also curious how the last year with coronavirus and the pandemic has affected operations here, what you've been able to do.
Yeah, it was tough. The pandemic has had a tremendous impact on museums because, obviously so much of what we do is connected directly to the public. I personally feel that we managed to continually stay relevant and engaged well because we were already kind of developing a lot of social media, different things, and then because of the background I had in television, we started generating a lot of franchise programming. My education person at the time was now my PIO, my public information guy. He developed some signature shows that run weekly. A Monday show, then a What Is It Wednesday, which basically we look at a particular artifact, and then we profile a different Delta city on Mondays. And then my education guy, he developed a Delta crafts show. And so we did a lot of really cool, innovative things to get people involved. We opened one of our exhibits via virtual, and it did really well. And so we kind of just found ways to be creative. The other thing that was really kind of cool was it was completely unexpected. Was so some of our properties are parks. So we've got like Freedom Park, which basically tells the story of the Emancipation Proclamation here in Phillips County, as I was telling y'all about the contraband. And we have Fort Curtis and Battery C. And so what happened was, during the pandemic, we saw a huge uptick in our parks, because people started going to the parks, I guess because they were getting cabin fever or whatever, so they wanted to go. They wanted to go out, and so we saw a huge increase in our park utilization. So obviously a huge drop off in our museum attendance, but then we saw a really big increase in our park. So in some ways it was almost a balance, almost. Mm-hmm. Now financially, as far as museum sales, no. I mean, we obviously lost a lot in sales, but as far as museum traffic and engagement, it was almost not too far off. So that was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good to hear.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for asking.
I will be buying a shirt today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I actually have a question.
So, what's King Biscuit?
King Biscuit. Okay.
I need to
Thank
know.
you. No, that's very important. Very important. Okay, so King Biscuit is King Biscuit Blues Time, which is King Biscuit Blues Time is the oldest running syndicated blues show in the country. And King Biscuit Time is also the name of the festival that happens every Columbus Day weekend here in Helena. And so we don't host King Biscuit Blues Festival, but we have our activities that happen simultaneously during that time. One of them being our front porch blues bash, which is where we host what we consider to be authentic blues artists during that time, and people come, and it's kind of like it looks like a little porch, a little hole in the wall place, and people come in and listen to blues artists and stuff.
Yeah, so I guess the exhibits in your museum change, but
Some do and some are permanent.
does the blues stuff, is that permanent?
Yes, over here on this side, what we call it, the East Gallery, it stays the same. That's what we call Delta Sounds, and it remains the same. But the Center Gallery and then the West Gallery, those exhibits change out.
Okay, because I was going to ask, obviously the blues are extremely important to everyone in this region, but I wanted to know if you had like a relationship with music, or if you wanted to talk about that.
A what?
A relationship with music?
A relationship with music?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a musician, singer.
I guessed, by the way.
Yeah, I started out a music major in college.
Of course he did.
Vocal music. I still write and play keyboards, and yeah.
Did you play in church too?
No, I didn't. But I did lead worship for a long time.
I feel like you'd be good because you're like really good with kids too.
Thank you.
You're a good worship leader, yeah.
Thank you. I think I did almost everything in church, almost everything you can do. I've done children's church, worship leader. I've done a lot.
Are you still really active in the church?
I am, but in different capacities. Because I've now kind of got a lot of other things that I do. I do a lot of online Christian counseling now, and so actually,
online, okay.
And so actually, like on Sundays is when I do a lot of my work now.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So you are working to get this church restored. And I've heard a lot of differing opinions about like the importance of places. Some people are like, well, as long as we have the community, that's all that matters. Other people say, you know, my grandparents are buried at the church. It needs to stay. So I wanted to ask you about the importance of physical memory in Elaine and if that's shared among everyone.
Physical memory in Elaine. I mean, I think it's extremely important. I think the physical memory in Elaine is very important, and I think that there needs to be some things in Elaine. One of the things that I was looking at, in particularly our contribution with Heritage, Arkansas Heritage was. This was just my idea. I hadn't even talked to anyone at Elaine about it.
Ooh.
But I've talked to some people about getting quotes as actually doing like an outdoor type. I don't know what you would call it. Not really a mark or a museum,
Okay.
but actually doing like a replica of Hujsa.
What's that?
The church.
Oh, the church, okay.
But doing like a replica of it, you know, I can see it in my mind.
Wow, yeah.
But doing like a replica of it and have it, and have, you know, like different, different plaques that tell different stories, you know, with different places where you might have audio of where you might would hear audio pieces or hear. This may have been what the choir sounded like, or this may have been what Moore's speech that he gave, you know, prior to the shooting, stuff like that. Just things that would kind of allow people to picture what it was like then.
Yeah.
And I agree with Dr. Olson. I think that there should be something in Elaine.
That would be really good for the town. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think memorials are important. I think spaces are important. I think physical. I hear both sides. But I know one of the things that always comes back to us, and it's been since back in the 2000s when I was here, people will always say, well, where can I go to find out more about Elaine? So people really want to physically be able to go somewhere where they can see and hear and experience something. And I think that should be there.
There needs to be a place.
We put up a memorial, but I think it needs to be more than that. I think there needs to be an exhibit.
Yep.
You know.
Well, you said you were trying to get the church designated as a historical monument. Mm-hmm. Are you doing that through the state or federally? Or through the county?
That's Centennial.
Mm-hmm.
Now Centennial.
Oh, sorry.
Centennial. Yeah, we're working with legislators now. You know, United States representatives and senators.
Do you find them to be receptive to that?
Yeah, now they are. Yeah, now they're actually very perceptive to it, and they've told us. They say, hey, this looks like this is the type of project that the president wants to fund. I mean, keep in mind, y'all, this is politics. So, you believe the best, but
Oh, do you think they have like a secondary angle, I guess, in newspaper speak?
I don't think so much a secondary angle. It's just, priorities can change,
Yeah, that's true.
Priorities change, and then when priorities change, the funding changes. So you say cautiously optimistic, but
Give me the funding now, like quickly.
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Dr. Miller? Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I guess my My question would be in that you study the Arkansas Delta and really celebrate its history and preserving that. What would you say are the differences and the major similarities between the Mississippi, as we often hear about the Delta? When you say the Delta, most of the time, you know, you think of Mississippi. So how culturally different is Arkansas from that, or how, in which ways is it similar?
I think that, obviously in many ways it's very similar. I mean, it's basically like exactly, in some ways almost exactly the same. I think the things the part that makes it really different is that the economic class early on. Now as time went on, I think the picture began to look almost identical. But initially, there was a distinctive, black, middle class here that I'm not confident was as pronounced in Mississippi, on the Mississippi side, and the impact of the union. I know that was not reflective in Mississippi, because Mississippians came over here actually to enlist in the Union Army. So I think that's kind of I think those are probably two things that probably make us a little bit different.
So something that we hear a lot from a lot of our interviews and things that we've heard from leaders is that Elaine has a very strong sense of community, and I just wanted to hear your experience with that and what you love most about that kind of community.
I agree with that. Elaine does. There's a lot of beautiful people there, and close-knit people, and people who care. People, it's a very loving community, and people who really, have dedicated a lot. I know I've worked with, I can just think of Reverend Gibson, Dr. Olson, although she's not a native to Elaine, but Patricia, is it Kinsley? Her last name, Patricia K. I was just say Patricia K. But I mean, they spend a very, very large amount of their time, pulling together resources and projects and things that really they themselves, in my view, have no personal benefit for, except only to see their communities better by it. And I think that's awesome.
Is there anything else you want to say? Just put on the record. Anything else you want to say? Oh, yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Okay, so my question for you revolves around education. You mentioned that recently you got the opportunity to discuss the Elaine Massacre to kids. I wanted to know the age range that you spoke, and then also how would you go about talking about it to different age groups, like elementary to high school?
Good. So right now, the group that I have, they're 7th graders to 12th graders. So what is that, 12-year-olds? 12-year-olds to about 17 or 18. But I've actually discussed it with kids even younger. And what was interesting today was we took some different themes. We looked at we had 4 words that we put up, and they had to word walls that they wrote different thoughts on, and they were racism, insurrection, separatism, and there was another word I don't remember. But what was particularly interesting was, so when we started talking about the insurrection and things of that nature, then the protest in Washington came up, and and then from there, came up George Floyd, and and then all these other and Black Lives Matter, and it was just like, okay, nothing's changed. Mm-hmm. And so I was sitting there, amazed and a little angry at the same time. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, it's like 102 years, and we're still dealing with this crap, mm-hmm. But I was having this very lively conversation with our students, and I basically was just saying, so this is the relevancy of something like Elaine, because many people said, we don't need to talk about this. This is the past. We need to move on. And I said, and because of those types of attitudes, that's why we had this other stuff. I shouldn't say garbage, but we had this other stuff going on or the negativity aspects as a result of it. Of course, all of it wasn't garbage, but some of it was. The negative aspects of it because of not dealing with the past. Because if we would have really had open conversations and looked at these things and started addressing these things, maybe we wouldn't be still in this circle 102 years later. Mm-hmm. Only how you can ever, and because even now there are Caucasians who are descendants of Elaine, and we still don't know their story.
Yeah.
And I know they're ashamed of it, mm-hmm. but they know stuff. They probably, I believe they know. And there's, I can't chapter and verses, I don't know. But I can't help but suspect that somebody knows where the bodies are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where were folks buried? They probably know a pretty close amount of some good estimates of how many folks were buried.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They've purposely clamped down on that information because they don't want to talk about it. But how are we going to heal?
Yeah. They feel ashamed, and why they want to fix it.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk about it, get it out there. Because you can't dress a wound until you first clean it up. It's like we keep wanting to put the Band-Aid over it, and we hadn't. You got to put the peroxide in there. Clean out the scab wound or whatever, the garbage or whatever you got inside the wound out. You got to clean it out before you can put the bandage on. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah.
And I was also thinking about my students, because I'm also an educator, and sometimes there's varying degrees of optimism sometimes about the future. And I wanted to know how your students responded after, informing them about the massacre, and knowing that they live in such a segregated, city, town area, how are their feelings towards it, the future?
I don't know. I don't know. That's to be continued. I have to find that out on Monday. Okay. I'm always optimistic though. I always feel like things can always get better. I've never, I don't care how bad it is. I always feel like it can always get better.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want people to know about your ancestors as we wrap this up? Or just, to know about people who lived in Elaine. What would you want people to know about them?
thinking. I think that I just think that, you know, I kind of said it once, but I think it might bear repeating, is that I don't think we can underscore how, or underplay, I should say, how impactful it was in so many different ways, because, you know, even, you know, like I said, my great-grandfather, he was sent off. My great auntie, you know, she packed up after, because, you know, after her husband got killed, she packed up with her kids. They went to Chicago. Never came back. And this was her home. Never came back. And until 2 years ago, when we had our family reunion, that was our first time seeing that side of the family. They had never been here. So, yeah, it was a big thing. And so I think that, you know, Elaine was one of those tragedies in history that I think the best way to advance is to talk about it, so that we can heal from it.
So to acknowledge.
Just to acknowledge, okay, this happened. You know, I heard someone say the other day, it was a kind of an interesting analogy. They were talking about, you know, like in chemical dependency, you know, like for instance, in AA, you know, when the first step to healing is you have to acknowledge, you know, I'm an alcoholic. It's the same way. You have to acknowledge. You have to acknowledge that this happened. You can't just say, oh, well, it never happened, or it's the past, let's move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Do you want that to be your last word on it, or do you have anything you want to add to the record for?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for y'all's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.